Welcome to the second video where we're going to be learning to read the Greek New Testament. This is part 2. In this video, we're going to be learning some new vocabulary. We're going to finish learning the alphabet, or at least the letters in it. We're going to review the vocabulary from the last video, and then we're going to review the alphabet and new words from this video. Okay, so looking at some new vocabulary. First of all, apostolos means apostle. Apostolos, apostle. Dia, through, because of, or by. Dia, through, because of, or by. Thelematos means will. Now, just to be clear, this means will in the sense of intention. Thelematos. Theou, of God. Theou. Tois means the, or is often translated as the. Christo, to Christ. Now, the word to in brackets there, that's a bit flexible. Sometimes it means to Christ. Sometimes it means other things. We're just going to leave it as to Christ for the moment. So we've got 6 new words: apostolos, apostle; dia, through, because of, or by; thelematos, will; theou, of God; tois, the; Christo, to Christ. You may want to pause the video and just read through those Greek words to become fluent in saying them, because that will help with the memorizing the definitions as well. Okay, so this is the Greek alphabet. In blue, we've got all the letters we saw in the previous video, and in orange, we have all the letters that we're going to see in this video. So first of all, we're going to look at our new words and see if we can identify any of these letters we haven't come across yet. And first of all, we have omega. Omega is the last letter of the Greek alphabet. And just to be clear, omega is just the symbol in the middle that looks like a sideways 3. It's not the symbols below or above it. So below it, we have an iota subscript. And above it, we have an accent. We'll talk about accents later. But this is pronounced Christo. And as I said, the omega is the last letter of the alphabet. The iota subscript underneath it, that is not pronounced. So Christo. Then we have dia. Now this is delta, delta, a bit like our English D. And we also have what's called a grave accent. Now, in terms of pronouncing accents, I think most of the time these days, people mainly prefer you just to put a stress on that particular letter or syllable, rather than necessarily going up or down. There's a bit of debate around whether you're actually going up or down with these accents. But this one's called a grave accent, and you just need to put stress on the alpha at the end. So delta, iota, alpha, dia or dia. Thelematos. And here we have the acute accent. So if we go back to the previous slide, the grave accent seems like it's slanting downwards as we go from left to right, whereas thelematos, the acute accent, is slanting up, going from left to right. We have another new letter here, mu, like our Greek letter M, it's m, mu, and this is pronounced thelematos. Then we have apostolos, apostolos, theou, theou, tois, And notice the Omicron iota in the middle is pronounced oi, as in oil, so tois. Now, you can see we've gone through a few more letters, but we haven't seen all of the Greek letters yet. There's about 6, or there are 6 that we haven't seen in a word. So we're going to look at them individually, so we don't need to continue going past this video. So the first one is beta, or beta. Some people call it beta. What you call it doesn't matter quite as much as the sound that it makes, which is a b, as in a B sound, b, beta. Gamma, g, like our English G, gamma. Zeta or zeta, making a Z or a DZ sound, so Z or Z. Again, there's a bit of flexibility sometimes with the choice of pronunciation. Then we have Xi, which is either an X or a KS sort of sound. X. So Xi. Phi, making an F or a PH sound. Phi or Phi. And lastly, we have Psi. Now, if you think of the sound at the word of psychology, but imagine that you're pronouncing the P at the start of psychology, that's what it sounds like. But when we pronounce the letter in a word, we get the PS sound, like lips. So psi. Okay, we're going to go back and review some vocab from the previous video, and then we'll come back and try and consolidate the vocab and the alphabet from this video. So ha, what does ha mean? The. Ha generally means the. Theos, what does that mean? God. Theos, God. Kai, and or also. Kai means and, or it can mean also. En, in. So en generally means in. Paulos, Paul. So we might be saying Paulos, or we might be saying Paulos, but either way it means Paul. Christou, of Christ. Jesu, of Jesus. Okay, so this is all the vocabulary from the previous lesson. If you got some of that wrong when we were just practicing, you might want to again pause and just read through each one that you got wrong a few times. Now, what I want to do is actually want to compare this to the vocabulary from this lesson, because you may have picked up some similarities. First of all, in the first video we had theos. In the second video we have theou. So theos, God, theou, of God. We have another pair of words, Christou and Christo. Christou, of Christ. Christo, to Christ, even though that too might be flexible and might end up meaning a different word. But we've got two words, Christou and Christo, which are clearly about Christ. Just it's the helping word or the idea of them that is slightly different. Now we have a third pair of words, ha, which is generally translated the, or often translated as the, and tois, which is also often translated as the. So if we pair them up, we can see we've got 3 pairs of words that some of them look very similar, but ha and tois actually look quite different. But they're generally translated very similarly. And this is essentially the first time that you will be experiencing what's called inflection. So the Greek language is a very inflected language. It's often what can make it hard. It's part of the reason why I'm going through this approach and not teaching inflection up front, but learning to get a feel for it before we officially define what it is. But inflection is essentially how the word changes as its use in the sentence changes. And we'll look at how that change happens more officially at a much later date. At this stage, we're mostly interested in memorizing particular forms because they are forms in passages we are trying to learn. And as we become more familiar with forms and how the forms change as they are used differently in the sentence, we will then get a much more intuitive sense before defining how that form change happens. Okay, let's review the alphabet. So what is this letter and what sound does it make? Beta or beta, and makes a B sound. What about this letter? Gamma, which makes a G sound. Gamma. This letter is delta, which makes a D sound. You might notice also that beta or beta looks like a B and makes a B sound, and delta looks a little bit like a D and makes a D sound. So there are some similarities. What about this letter? Zeta or zeta makes a Z or a Z sound. Mu, making a M sound, mu. Xi, making it X or a KS sound, so X, Xi. Phi or Phi, making it F sound, as in free with an F, or phone with a PH. Phi or Phi. Psi, making a PS sound, as in lips, so ps, ps. You notice at the end there, I mentioned earlier, the I or psi is a bit like psychology with P at the front. Just emphasizing that when pronouncing the word, the letter I is making the sound like I, not it. So psi. Omega. So we have an O sound, omega. So these are all the new letters from this video: beta, gamma, delta, zeta, mu, xi, psi, xi, phi, psi, omega. Okay, let's review the vocab that we've learnt earlier in this video. Apostolos, apostle, apostolos. Dia, through, because of, or by. Dia, through, because of, or by. Thelematos, will. Thelematos, will. Theu, of God. Theu, of God. Tois, the, tois, Christo, to Christ, Christo, and again, if you need to practice any of them, you can pause the video and practice pronouncing the words and practice the definitions. Okay, well that brings us to the end of this video. In the next video, we're going to be really consolidating the alphabet and trying to learn it in order. And then after that, we are going to start to read phrases, multi-word phrases that actually appear in the New Testament in preparation to get us to a reading stage or reading whole verses or parts of verses in the next few videos. And then after those two videos, we're going to go back to learning some new vocabulary. And a bit later on, we'll start to look at parts of speech and how they function together.